Mail call! Hello, everybody. It's Hong Long from Hong Long Wuxia, and we've got another package. Another box of books. I know it's a books because I ordered it. And it's from my favorite store, Maring Books. So, let us see what we have in the box. This one's much easier to open than the last one. Well, maybe I spoke too soon. Well, this knife isn't as sharp as it looks. Yeah, not as sharp as it looks. Meant more for stabbing than for slicing. All right, that ought to do it. All right. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. All right, so first off, we have advertisement. And the first thing we have here is a pamphlet from the Socialist Equality Party, and it is called the 2020-2023, The Global Capitalist Crisis and the Offensive of the International Working Class. Let me move it over here so that you may see what we actually have. Let's back it up here. There we go. This is a perspective resolution written by David North, the chairman of the World Socialist website, the chairman of the International Editorial Board of the World Socialist website and the Socialist Equality Party of the United States, as well as the General Secretary of the Socialist Equality Party of the United States, Joseph Kishore. And it was published first on January 3rd, 2023. This is actually on the website, so you don't have to buy it, but if you want to support them, you should. And next we have the political lessons of Syriza's betrayal in Greece. And that was a massive betrayal of the working class. These con men and charlatans, one and all, and their their supporters claimed that they were representing the working class and the blah 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 blah, and that this petty bourgeois party, which petty bourgeois essentially means middle class. It's associated, the words associated, the petty bourgeois is associated with people in like the academia, small shopkeepers, lawyers, doctors, well-to-do professional types. So anyway, Syriza was portrayed as the savior of the working class. And of course, as soon as they took power, just as the International Committee of the Fourth International said they would, they immediately began betraying their proposals. They they said that they would never institute the austerity measures dictated by the European community, and they did. They even held a referendum, and they betrayed the referendum. Slime buckets, one and all. Frankly, petty bourgeois types will never lead the working class anywhere except back into the arms of the bourgeoisie. The only way that the petty bourgeoisie will contribute to the workers' movement is through allegiance to the workers' movement, not the other way around. Next up, we have Frederick Douglass' autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Let me get that up there so we can see that good. For some reason, my camera doesn't look. There we go. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so the back of the book says former slave, impassioned abolitionist, brilliant writer, newspaper editor, and eloquent orator, an eloquent orator whose speeches fired the abolitionist cause. Frederick Douglass, 1818 to 1895, led an astounding life. Physical abuse, deprivation, and tragedy plagued his early years. Yet, through sheer force of character, he was able to overcome these obstacles to become a leading spokesman for the people. In this, the first and most frequently read of his 3 autobiographies, Douglass provides graphic description of his childhood and horrifying experiences as a slave, as well as a harrowing record of his dramatic escape to the North and eventual freedom. Published in 1845 to quell doubts about his origins, since few slaves of that period could write, the narrative is admired today for its extraordinary passion, sensitive and vivid descriptions, and storytelling power. It belongs in the library of anyone interested in African American history and the life of one of the country's most courageous and influential champions of civil rights. And I would also point out any person who is interested in socialism. So, next up from Eric London, we have Agents, the FBI and GPU infiltration of the Trotskyist movement. This is the most recent publication from the series on security and the Fourth International. A series began in the mid-1970s in order to uncover the reasons for Trotsky's death and assassination, or the reasons for Trotsky's assassination. And in the process, it exposed the infiltration of the entire upper echelons of the Socialist Workers' Party, who at one point was the leadership of the Trotskyist movement in the United States, up until their reunifications with the Pabloites in the mid-60s. In response to the, what's the word? The spontaneous? No, the spontaneous Marxism of Fidel Castro. Next, we have on the list, we have maybe the most important work of both literature and nonfiction of the last century, and that would be The History of the Russian Revolution by Leon Trotsky. This is my second copy of the book. I've gone through it like 3 times. But the book was trashed about a year ago, which means I lost all my friggin' notes because all my notations are done in the books. So I'm going to have to go over this again thoroughly. And I have to go through and do a serious study of this again, which I would recommend that everybody do. Instead of reading like a piece from the back of the book, let's just open up to a random page and let's read a paragraph. This is from the chapter The Masses Under Attack, page 554. This is the edition that is translated by Max Eastman and published by... Yeah, okay. So this edition is published by Haymarket Books, 2008. Yep, paperback 2008. So, all right, so let's read like a paragraph here. So it's a... So let's read a paragraph from The History of the Russian Revolution. The political role of these Cossacks was determined by their special situation in the state. The Cossacks had from long ago been a unique privileged caste of a lower order. The Cossacks paid no taxes and enjoyed a considerably larger land allotment than the peasant. In the 3 neighboring territories, Don, Kuban, and Tver, the Cossack population of 3 million owned 23 million desiatins of land, while the 4.3 million peasants in the same territories owned only 6 million desiatins. So that's about a quarter of the same amount owned by the Cossacks. The Cossacks, that was an aside by me, by the way. The Cossacks owned, on average, that is, 5 times as much per capita as the peasants. So even more when we account for their smaller number. Okay, so back to the book. Among the Cossacks themselves, the land was divided, to be sure, very unequally. They had here their landlords and Kafka, or here and there their landlords and kulaks, even more powerful than in the north. They had also their poor. Every Cossack was obliged to present himself at the demand of the state on his own horse and with his own equipment. The rich Cossacks more than covered this expense with their freedom from taxes, but the lower ranks were bowed down under the burden of this liability to service. These fundamental data sufficiently explain the self-contradictory position of the Cossackdom as a whole. In its lower strata, it came in close contact with the peasants, in its upper with the landlords. At the same time, the upper and lower strata were united by a consciousness of their special situation, their position as a chosen people, and were accustomed to look down not only upon the workers, but also upon the peasant. This was what made the Middle Cossack so useful for putting down revolts. Again, I would highly, again, the best book written in the 20th century overall, all-sided presentation. For me, when I began my studies, I studied Marxism in college, but as is typical of bourgeois institutions, they very rarely lead you to read the original source material until you get to unless you're doing your doctorate and you do it on your own damn time. I went to 4 or 5 different universities, and not one of them, and I took a course in history or politics at each of the, well, except for one university. I only took one course there. So at 4 of those places, I took courses in history and politics, up to the 400, actually up to the 400 level and to 500 level at 2 of those places, 2 of those institutions. So, and none of them had us read the original Marxist material. None of us had to read Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mering, any actual Marxists from before 1920, or people who profess to be Marxists before 1920. Let's put it that way, because on the reading list there were anti-Marxists, of course, like Sartre and Camus and all those traitors to the working class that came out in the 30s, 40s, and 50s and onwards. But as for real Marxism, we were never given, we were only given interpretations of their materials to go over and read. So when I got out of college, I did read the Communist Manifesto, was probably the first Marxist, actual Marxist literature that I read. And then I read, I got a copy of, I'll bring it out. I'll show it sometime. Well, actually, let me go get it now. All right, so I read the Communist Manifesto, and then I read. I also went through. I got a copy, a Penguin Classics copy from the local bookstore of Marx's collected writings, which included things such as the Civil War in France, the 18 Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, and then I also read Lenin's Essential Works of Lenin. This is the actual book, and this book contains What is to be Done, State and Revolution, the Development of Capitalism in Russia, which was one of his first things, blah, blah, blah. It also contains Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. So I read that, and then I came to, I started to read The Russian Revolution from Leon Trotsky. And after that, my next book was this, Rosa Luxemburg Speaks, which includes most of her major works, but it was of course introduced by Mary Alice Waters, who the study agents, not specifically this work, but who, from that study of security in the Fourth International, discovered that Miss Mary Alice Waters, who wrote the introduction for this book and many more from Pathfinder Press, who was in the upper echelons of the Socialist Workers' Party, was an agent of the U.S. government, as well as her erstwhile husband, I can't remember his name offhand, Stromsey or something like that, who committed suicide. So, all right, so next up, and it looks like lastly, we have dun 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 dun. We have a book that I had never heard of. Okay, so next we have a book that I did not even hear of, and I just happened to see on the website, and yeah, it is called, there we go, Prophets Unarmed, and it says the Chinese Trotskyists in Revolution, War, Jail, and their return from limbo. It's edited by George Benton. And let me read the back of it. It says, Prophets Unarmed is an authoritative source book on the Chinese Communist Party's main early opposition, the Chinese Trotskyists. Opposed by Stalin in Moscow and by Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong in China, the Trotskyists were China's most persecuted political party. Though harassed nearly out of existence, their standpoints and proposals reproduced here are not without relevance to China's present political moment. Drawing on dozens of oral history, interviews with survivors, this study of Chinese Trotskyism is exhaustive and groundbreaking. George Benton is a research professor at Nanyang Technological University. He is the author of Mountain Fires, which was honored by the University of California Press as a special book in Asian Studies and by the Association of Asian Studies as the best book on modern China. His translation of F. Hufeng's Prison Years won the English Pen Award. It's published by Haymarket Books. Well, so anyway, until I saw this on the website, I had never heard of this. And literally the only information that I've ever read coming about Chinese Trotskyists was there were two or three books. The main one was Leon Trotsky's collection of books on the Chinese. Let me go get those. So, all right, so I'm back. So the only books on the Chinese Trotskyists that I've ever seen is this one from Leon Trotsky on China, as well as this one, The Problems of the Chinese Revolution, also by Trotsky. And there is, in the series Trotskyism versus Revisionism, this gentleman, Mr. Peng, or this former comrade, Mr. Peng Shu-tzu, wrote a few things there too. And to be honest, I can't remember. It's been so long since I read it. To be honest, I can't remember what his position was. I don't want to say anything about it because I don't want to be wrong. And I don't want to paint a false picture of who the man is. So if you're interested, I would recommend going to read that article. Anyway, the Prophets Unarmed. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. This is a tome though. Actually, there's a whole chapter in here. I just opened it randomly, and there's an entire chapter dedicated to Peng Shu-tzu. Although they use they're using the pinyin to write his name there instead of the Wade Giles system of writing his name, which is right there. If you want to know more about that? Watch my videos on Chinese calligraphy, where I go over some of that. Some of these guys, okay, Chen Duzhu, he was one of the leaders of the revolution, or the movement before it was decapitated. I do know that, or I do remember that. Okay, so look at some of these chapters. All right, so some of the chapters from the book. Moscow's Sun Yat-sen University. Sun Yat-sen, for those of you who don't know, was a petty bourgeois leader of the Democratic Revolution in China. He was not a Marxist. And, of course, the Stalinists tied the working class to the bourgeoisie in their block of 4 classes. I laugh, but it's not really funny because it caused that policy alone could be that policy alone could be attributed to that policy alone could be used as an excuse for the current position that we find ourselves in. Because had that policy not been instituted, and had there been a true revolutionary policy instituted in China, especially with the leadership that did exist in China at the time, there would have been a successful socialist revolution in China, one that was actually carried out by the working class and not by petty bourgeois mediocrities like Mao Zedong, who tied the working class after the slaughter in 1927 and 28 to the peasantry. And then who, when they took power, went out and started to slaughter the working class leaders. So anyway, that's the first chapter. Second chapter is the year 1931. And then we go on to Chengdu, and then Peng Shuzi, and then Peng Shuzi, and then the Chinese Trotskyists Unification Congress, which I know zero about. Traitors and Informers, Qin Duzhu's Last Years, Chen Qishang, Cheng Chaolin, Huang Jiangtong, and Du Weiji. These are all people's names, and most of them, or 3 out of the 4 I'd never heard before. Wang Gulong, Zhao Benxing, and Zhao Lu Kuang. That's one chapter, those 3. And then an epilogue, postscript, and then part 2, autobiographical accounts of Chinese Trotskyists' early years, the unfinished autobiography of Chen Duzhu, a consciousness awakes from Cheng Chaolin, my first contact with new ideas, Wang Fanji. So I'm guessing these are the extant documents from these Trotskyists. Chinese Trotskyists in the Revolution, 1925-7, and that's part 3. First chapter is before and after May 30th from Cheng Chaolin, and 2 years at university from Wang Fanji. Part 4 is Chinese Trotskyists in Moscow, 12 people, Cheng Chaolin, KUTV, Cheng Chaolin, Chinese students in Moscow from Wang Fangji. Get my eyes to work. I'm still wearing these bifocal contacts, so. Okay, there we go. My second year in Moscow from Wang Fangji. Chinese students at the International Lenin School in Moscow, 1926 to 1938. Light from the Russian Archives. Alexander oh, my eyes are starting to swim here. Alexander Funtsov and Daria Spichek. Stalin and the Chinese Communist Dissidents. Alexander Pansov. Part 5 is the unification of Chinese Trotskyists. Appeal to all comrades of the Chinese Communist Party. I'm gonna skip reading the people's names now, unless that's what it is. In Ebbing or A Flowing Tide, The Left Opposition, Unification of the Four Groups. Part 6 is Chinese Trotskyism in the 30s and the 40s. The Founding of Struggle and the Darkest Days of My Life, Chen Duzhu, The Chinese Trotskyists and the War of Resistance, The Pacific War and a New Split in the Organization, and Cheng Chao-lin's 1987 postscript to the English edition of his memoirs, a self-description at the age of 90, postscript to an Oxford edition of the memoirs of Chinese Revolution, and a couple of other documents from Wang Fengji. Part 16, The Chinese Trotskyists' Imprisonment and Release from Prison. Statement by Chinese Trotskyists overseas on the CCP's release of Cheng Chao-lin and other Trotskyists and Trotskyist political prisoners, 24th of July, 1979. Okay, a brief account of my third spell in prison from Cheng Chao-lin. Part 17, Wang Fengji reviews Tang Baolin's history of Chinese Trotskyism. All right, so this one is a very thick volume, and I'm sure if you're not a Trotskyist, all right, or Chinese, it's probably not going to interest you that much. But if you are one of those, or a socialist, or somebody who claims to be socialists, yeah, well, at least from a cursory look at the contents, I would highly recommend this book. I would highly recommend this book. But yeah, I'm going to temper that because a lot of this, I'm guessing many of these people wound up becoming tied to the United Secretariat after their release from prison. But we shall see once I read it. All right, everybody, that's it for today. As always, if you liked the video, make sure to like and share. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel because it will help me enormously. So on that note, I bid you all adieu. And keep reading.